All right, folks, Texas A&M University, they've announced a $1 million settlement with Kathleen McElroy, the University of Texas professor who A&M agreed to hire to run the Department of Journalism. Okay, they were supposed to give her a 5-year contract and give her tenure, but then it hit a snag. Why? Because the Board of Regents got involved. Not only have they released a statement regarding that settlement, they also have released the results of an internal review, and what it shows clearly and convincingly that members of the Board of Regents got involved in her hiring. It was even to the point where the president did not want, Kathleen Banks, who later resigned, did not want to even announce her arrival until after the legislative session because of the optics of hiring somebody who used to work for the New York Times. In this internal review, it shows regents were heavily involved, 6 to 7 regents. It shows the university president lied when she met with the faculty senate. Everything that woman said was an absolute lie, and the report details that. Greg Carr, I want to go to you first because, again, they list the whole timeline of what happened here. And what you have here is undeniable. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick cannot be ignored here. What you have are white conservatives who did not want this black woman hired. And the Board of Regents, they've apologized to her. That was one of the demands that I made. They've had the settlement, but the reality is this here. You have the faculty, they've been saying this is going to be a chilling effect when it comes to hiring faculty in the future. And this is what we can expect to see by these white conservatives in these southern states. We know what happened to Nicole Hannah-Jones in the University of North Carolina. And so it's the same thing right here. They did not want this black woman, had nothing to do with credentials, had to do with the color of her skin.
Absolutely, and they succeeded. Congratulations to Texas A&M, just like the University of North Carolina succeeded in running off my now colleague at Howard, Nicole Hannah-Jones. I say congratulations, of course, tongue firmly planted in cheek. This is just the latest iteration of a long arc of the erosion of public universities. Higher education has been in crisis for quite some time. We've seen a number of resignations of presidents over the last few months. Some of that is because the expectation of the role of university president is increasingly changing. It's increasingly different. There's a lot of board interference, and there's a lot of board expectation that college presidents do something that they haven't been doing before. Howard University just hired a president who is a full-blown academic and an academic administrator. And I would say that that's kind of an outlier these days. People are looking for business people and folk to grow the footprint of the university and do everything from build bigger football stadiums to bring in more grant dollars. And increasingly, higher education is looking like the free market institutions. And that's not the purpose of a university. Essentially, it's not supposed to be. But in this case, you see that trend clashing with exactly what you said, the deeply racist policies, particularly when we start talking about those behind the cotton curtain, those public state universities in the South that are much more interested in whether Negroes can run up and down a football field, which is why the irony of having Professor McElroy sign her contract as if she were a recruited 5-star athlete just reinforced that foolishness. But it comes down to this. It was bloody. Yes. Yes, the president lied and had to resign. Yes, all of those things are true. But if you're trying to get rid of her, even if by paying $1 million, you've achieved your purpose. I am sad for, and as you raised holy hell from the beginning, Roland, I'm sad for the students at Texas A&M who will not now have the opportunity to be taught by her and by the people who will be brought in by her. I'm sad for the alumni network. They would not have access to her and her network. Ultimately, what these white boys did, they got their woman. They may have to pay her $1 million, but she's not going to be an Aggie now, is she?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and here's the deal. Well, first of all, she's already an Aggie because she's a graduate, but they don't want her teaching. And here's the deal. To all these fiscal conservatives, to all these fiscal conservatives, Reese, it's $1 million of taxpayer money.
And they don't give a damn because white supremacy is priceless, to Dr. Carr's point. And they play for keeps every single time. So they will, I would like $1 million. You can discriminate against me and not give me a job for $1 million. But I'm just saying she deserves every penny that she's getting. But to these white nationalists, the $1 million is what, it's not a big deal to them. And they're going to keep paying off who they need to pay off. But the more chilling effect is the way that it'll be harder to recruit. This is what we're seeing across the country and these Republican trifecta states. They're having issues filling these positions in Florida. And so it really is the students that suffer. And students are going to have to be a little bit more discerning about the institutions that they go to. And are those institutions upholding the values of, in terms of hiring the kinds of people that are going to be the most enriching to their education? Unfortunately, most people go to school locally, and so they don't have the privilege to relocate to another state that maybe has more progressive leadership, or you don't have these crazy ass Republicans meddling in their education to the extent that they're doing in these states. But it is a loss and it is unfortunate, but it's another example of Republicans playing for keeps every single time, going after every single position and leaving no stone unturned.
Candace, Texas A&M's statement. Texas A&M acknowledges that mistakes were made during the hiring process related to Dr. McElroy. The leadership of Texas A&M apologizes to Dr. McElroy for the way her employment application was handled, has learned from its mistakes, and will strive to ensure similar mistakes are not repeated in the future. Commenting on the settlement, McElroy said, quote, Texas A&M University remains in my heart despite the events of the past month. I will never forget that Aggies, students, faculty members, former students, and staff voiced support from me from many sectors. I hope the resolution of my matter will reinforce A&M's allegiance to excellence in higher education and its commitment to academic freedom in journalism. She is staying as a tenured professor at the University of Texas at Austin, which, of course, is the biggest rival of Texas A&M. That is also here, the Chancellor John Sharp, he issued a statement as well. But the other thing is that in addition to this here, they also had an investigation over a professor who criticized Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. But first of all, now here's the deal. Nobody can say what she really said, but he led to the launch of an investigation. They also admit that how that was handled was also wrong. But what I need people, everybody who's watching to understand, who's listening to understand, is that, and this is why I discuss in my book, White Fear, how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. What we have to understand is these people are engaged in an all-out assault on blackness. While we're discussing this, Ed Bloom, the white man who led the effort to give affirmative action in colleges and universities, today filed a lawsuit against a black women-focused venture fund in Atlanta and is literally trying to use the 1866 Civil Rights Act against black folks, even though, now here's a fund, Keisha Pulliam is involved in this, Candace, okay, and their goal is to target a venture capital fund to black women. We know for a fact that in private, less than 2% of all venture capital goes to black people. These white conservatives don't even want that to happen.
So we see two-pronged. The white conservatives don't want a lot to happen. And I'll go briefly on the professor. Since I am a professor, people have to understand that when you are actually applying for a job, that is a tight process that steps have to be followed. And if not, you are breaking the law. You have to ask all the candidates the same question. There can be no outsiders in the process. You were on that search committee. And when you make that decision, you present the decision, and that's the decision that it is. So anybody along the way, whether they're the Board of Regents, whether you're the chair of the department, if you weren't on that search committee, you are breaking the law. So that's something that was inevitable, that they would have to have a settlement, because that is not how you run a search committee, and that is not how you select candidates to be a part of your operation or university. When it comes to Bloom, here's one thing that I think the media is kind of guilty of, and that is making sure that this man is presented like some lone wolf, one-man band who's doing all of these things, from affirmative action to, as you said, using an old law to make sure that racist quotas aren't used, in his own words. But that is not the truth. This is a man who is supported by various levels of billionaires, leftist groups who support him in everything that he does. And the media is putting him out there and giving him more power than he even deserves, because it's just nonsensical. As you said, if you look at the numbers, if you're going to go to court, you have to look at the numbers, and the numbers don't make sense in terms of those who invest in organizations and groups like Black female run organizations or investment groups. It just doesn't happen. So I blame the media, but I also blame, just as you said, the whole the white conservatism that's been uplifting him to make sure that he's out here like this superhero doing all these things when there is a machine behind it. And that is how it should be presented. It's not just him, and we do ourselves a disservice by thinking he's just this one guy doing his own lone wolf thing. It is a whole system behind him, and that's how it has to be reported.
But the thing, though, Greg, it's not going to happen because, frankly, these outlets are filled with a number of white folks, and a lot of them, frankly, agree with this. Okay, liberals and conservatives. Look, I'm here at the NABJ convention in Birmingham. I'm walking past African Americans who are hosts of shows, and I know they've said their white producers will not let them book me on the show because they don't like the title of my book, because it deals with them. And so it's like I'm trying to say to the black folks, we better recognize the war that is going on. And I warn everybody, this was not about critical race theory. This was not about any of that stuff. They want to dismantle any and every program and initiative in academia, in government, with corporations that deals with equity. Everybody, all y'all black folks in corporate America, and this is where I'm going to need the Executive Leadership Council and the Black Economic Alliance and all of these people to understand, your members can't be satisfied sitting back collecting their nice black bougie checks. All of you black board members have got to wake the hell up, because they are going to sue every single company in this country regarding your hiring practices, regarding affinity groups, regarding how you recruit at HBCUs. They're going to sit here and go after everything because these people hate black people, and they are largely white conservatives, Greg.
No, absolutely. I wish them the best. Again, being facetious. Their funky settler experiment is crumbling. They're terrified, and they're not just booking you because they're not booking you because they don't like your title, Roland. But we know it's much more than that. They're not booking because they don't like you. See, there's something during the summer, the so-called summer of reckoning of 2020, when the National Football League and the National Basketball Association, certainly the NFL, had a little scared before when they thought they were going to have a whole slave rebellion, and even Jerry Jones took the knees. When you're faced with some people who have decided that they no longer care what you say, that becomes a real threat. You've got to destroy them. Ed Bloom, whose country and philosophy and culture is dying, make no mistake about it, it's dying and it's going to die. A painful death, but it's death nonetheless, is fighting with everything he has, and he should, because his funky little worldview is collapsing. So I understand Ed Bloom, and as Candace said, he's not alone. And as you said, Roland, he's not alone. The problem we have is that our people who achieve some level of visibility in these white platforms and white institutions are satisfied with that. And because they are satisfied with that, they are not going to fight with both fists. And everybody in those platforms, everybody down there in NABJ that you're interacting with, Roland, they all know you and you know them. And they're not going to risk their little job, their little access, their little badge, their little ability to be in the little room for saying, where's Roland Martin? Where's the independent black media? And as a result, these folk, as Recia said and Kansas said, they're marching with impunity. The University of North Carolina just announced that they have revised their admissions policies. They are going to make sure that they do everything they can to exclude us from those spaces. But guess what? We have spaces. Black Star Network is a space. HBCUs are a space. And so to all of our friends who prefer their little funky little access until they have their throats and with the last bleat from their lips as they realize they've made a mistake, they scream bloody murder and come running back to the race and say, save me, a word. You can't be saved as long as you love your master more than your people. And that's what we're seeing, even in this moment.